So, as you might have noticed if you watch my channel, recently I've been getting really into Linux and free software and all that type of shit. And here's a really interesting concept within the realm of free software that explains something I've been thinking about for a long while. This is the idea of malicious features within software, right? So what are malicious features? Now this is pretty easy to explain. Malicious features are any feature within software that's actively detrimental to the user, right? So, for example, a piece of malicious software that's really common might be an ad within uTorrent that tracks you, that gets your data, and you have to watch an ad, right? That might be a low-end malicious feature. It's not the end of the world, obviously. It's not the worst thing that could happen, but nonetheless, it is a malicious feature. So what are other types of malicious features? Well, you can look at Adobe Reader, for example. And what are malicious features in Adobe Reader? Well, first of all, it wants you to pay for its sweet shit, and it wants you to engage with its infrastructure. So it prevents a lot of compatibility and ease of use, and it has to communicate with its servers and so on, right? And then there are other programs that also have malicious features that track you, that the other kinds of that type of stuff, right? Where the software itself is rendered unusable by its own features, or at least worse to use than if it did not have those features, right? So how does this apply to the thing I'm going to talk about that you saw in the title, which is microtransactions, right? How does this apply to microtransactions? Am I going to say, hey, microtransactions are bad because they're malicious features, because they withdraw content from people who have bought the game? Is that the point I'm going to make? No, that's not the point I'm going to make. That would be a brainless point. So what's the point that I'm going to make? The point that I'm going to make is that the only problem with microtransactions is when they become malicious features, right? So let me explain. This is the clear difference that most people see between pay-to-win games and cosmetic microtransactions, right? Most people know that there's a difference between cosmetic microtransactions and pay-to-win games. Why is this? Well, the obvious answer is that cosmetic microtransactions are almost in all cases way less malicious than pay-to-win microtransactions, right? Obviously, there are exceptions. For example, in CSGO, there are cosmetic skins that are actively detrimental to gameplay balance, that make map quality worse, and that are generally obnoxious. In many other games, similar things happen. So in those cases, microtransactions can be malicious features, but they don't have to be necessarily. That's what most people understand. However, there's also this counterexample of whether pay-to-win features can be non-malicious features, right? Not saying that they're benevolent features or they're good features, but they're non-malicious, right? And yeah, there are ways that they can be non-malicious. For example, when you look at Shadowverse, right? That's a game, and a lot of Shadowverse is about buying packs, right? Because card games are about building a collection. However, nothing in Shadowverse tries to prevent you from playing free-to-play. Shadowverse is designed in such a way that you can pay and you cannot pay. No matter what you do, you will be able to achieve everything in the game. Now, I'm not really a Shadowverse expert. Maybe there's some exclusive thing that benefits people who pay way more, but in most cases, you're not really forced to pay in Shadowverse. This contrasts directly with games like MTG Arena and Hearthstone, where you're basically forced to pay if you want to have any degree of success. So that's how you can make non-malicious pay-to-win microtransactions, is when they don't actually give you a power boost, but rather just widen the scope of gameplay that you can experience. The same goes, for example, fighting game DLC characters, right? They aren't necessarily malicious. They just give you more options to play with, and unless they're ridiculously overpowered, they don't really constitute as a true sense of pay-to-win. Because you can compete with them with other characters, you just have more options if you have the DLC. So, okay, now that this has been established, right, why does this matter at all? Why does any of this actually matter for anything? Well, this is because of the third point I'm going to make, which is microtransactions are nowhere near the worst malicious features in games, specifically because people don't really abide by microtransactions anymore, right? Because you see the people talk about, okay, we're gonna get rid of gambling in games, right? And for example, in Rocket League, they got rid of gambling and introduced a worse system, a more malicious system, right? So the problem with games isn't loot boxes or microtransactions or whatever. The problem with games is that you can't have the features you want in games, or you can't have specific things that a game should have, right? So the problem isn't the microtransaction, right? The problem isn't the loot box, the problem isn't the gambling. I know a lot of people have a hate boner for gambling, but there's no inherent reason why gambling is bad. It's objectively a fun activity, and the fact that you don't like that it's fun is just on you, basically. But yeah, anyway, so if none of these specific issues are the problem, if none of these specific issues aren't the thing that's ruining games or whatever, then what's the thing that's ruining games? The thing that's ruining games is that all games, basically universally, are non-free software. All games do not respect your freedom. And I'm not saying, hey, games should cost nothing, that's not the point. I'm fine with selling licenses to games. I don't have any inherent problems with that. However, the thing is, games do not respect your freedom to play them as you want to play them. Games as software have been really and this is even more true as more time goes by, where games as software have gotten less moddable, less customizable, and rely more on centralized servers, right? You can't create your own servers in most games. You can't create your own mods in most games because they're so heavily reliant on a central internet connection, right? So since this is true, and since the problem with games is that they're non-free software, how can you fix it? Because if you allow anyone to have the source code for a game, for example, which would be a really easy fix for this, there might be oh, we can't make money with games and that entire spiel, which I don't even believe in, because games can easily be supported by the notions, so it doesn't even matter. However, if the developer updates the game in such a way that makes the game worse, or discontinues support for the game, or does any of these things, there should be other ways to play the game. I think almost anyone can agree on this. They just don't really have the vocabulary to properly express the distinction between what's free software and what's non-free software, right? So what should happen with games? In an ideal world, if you buy a game, you buy a license for the source code of the game, and are able to redistribute and do whatever you want with the source code, maybe with a restriction that the other person has to have a license for the game, and there might be an encryption check key type thing. Specific form doesn't really matter that much. The specific form here isn't really important, but the ideal state of being would be that the source code for all games is available to modify and redistribute, right? However, this is unviable for a lot of reasons, right? So what should a player do in this circumstance, right? What should gamers rise up to accomplish? Now, this is also a very simple question if you think about it, because the only thing you really need in this sense is the ability to host your own server, right? You don't need unlimited access to modify the game. You just need access to modify the server, to host your own server, and to have your own infrastructure, right? Maybe with the restriction that you can't monetize that endeavor, and it can only be a fan-made thing that doesn't make any money. That's completely fair. I don't have any problems with that either. Because in that case, any problems that you can have with games can't really exist, right? If you get malicious updates, right, that make the game worse, you can just run your own server instance where those updates don't happen, right? You should ideally even be able to pick and choose between updates, right? And what features you want to include in your instance of the game, and what features you don't want to include. Then, you should also be able to continue the game as operational for as much time as you are willing to host a server, right? So even if like people who made the game want to take it down, you can still host a server to play with you, like your friends or other people who still want to play the game, right? So, really, the problem with games is fundamentally that they're non-free software. However, practically, the problem with games is that people can't control their own instance of a game due to lacking any degree of control over the actual servers, right? And obviously modding should be supported. Modding support is good. Modding support should be essential for any game. And games that try to prevent mod support are actively fascist and trying to curtail your own freedom to modify your own software. So yeah, that's my opinions on video games. That's malicious software. That's why games are kind of fascist all of the time.